The numbers swam before my eyes, a dizzying array of red ink asserting its dominion over every black figure that dared to suggest profit. My office, once a sanctuary of ambition and strategic thought, had become a war room where I was constantly losing. Dennis Thorne, successful Christian businessman, that's what I used to be. Now I was just Dennis, a man drowning in debt, watching his empire, built on years of sweat and prayer, crumble before him. It was another one of those nights. My wife Sarah had long since retired, her whispered, "God is in control, honey," a soft echo against the drumming fear in my chest. But was he? Truly? Because from where I sat, surrounded by late notices and dwindling reserves, it felt like I was the only one in control, and I was doing a spectacularly bad job of it. The clock on the wall ticked with an irritating precision, each second a tiny hammer blow against my skull. My phone, usually a lifeline, lay silent, mocking my desperation. I picked up a stack of invoices, then tossed them back onto the polished mahogany desk that now felt more like a tombstone. Our largest client, Thorne Innovations, my namesake, had just pulled out of a major project, citing unforeseen internal restructuring. Translation: they'd found someone cheaper, someone less burdened by the weight of a dying business. A cold fear, sharp and invasive, pierced through my usual wariness. This wasn't just a bump in the road, this was the cliff edge. Payroll was due next week, and I didn't have half of it. The bank was already calling about the loan on the new equipment. My once sturdy faith felt like a tattered flag fluttering weakly in a storm. I believed in God, of course, but I also believed in hard work, in strategy, in putting in the hours, and I had done all of that. Exhausted, I had done everything. So why was it still falling apart? Was I not praying enough? Not tithing enough? Was there some hidden sin I'd yet to confess, some unforgiven transgression that had brought this curse upon my house? I leaned back in my chair, the squeal of the leather a mournful cry in the quiet office. My hands, calloused from years of gripping life with a tenacious will, now felt empty, useless. I closed my eyes, picturing Sarah's worried face, the subtle lines around her eyes that weren't there a year ago. My 2 young daughters, oblivious in their innocent dreams, depended on me. The weight was crushing. In the dim glow of my desk lamp, my eyes fell upon my worn leather Bible, lying open on a page marked by a faded bookmark. It was a habit I maintained, a daily ritual, even when my heart was too heavy to truly engage. Today I picked it up, not out of devotion, but out of sheer, unadulterated desperation. My fingers found the bookmark, and my eyes scanned the familiar words, almost dismissively at first. It was Mark 9:23. Jesus said to him, "If you can believe, all things are possible to him who believes." I'd read it countless times, preached it even. But tonight, it felt like a cold academic pronouncement, not a living truth. If you can believe. I believed, didn't I? I believed in God, in Jesus, in the resurrection. But did I believe this? Did I believe that all things were possible, even reversing the tide of my spiraling business? A deep sigh escaped me, laden with the frustration of a man who felt he was doing all the right things, yet seeing all the wrong results. I closed my eyes again, and in that quiet darkness, a different thought began to emerge, not from the frantic analytical part of my brain, but from a deeper, quieter place. It was the memory of a sermon, preached by an old pastor years ago, stirring something in my spiritual consciousness. He had spoken about God promising to pay our debts. He'd used the analogy, if someone promises to pay your debts, do you then go out and try to earn extra money to pay them yourself? Do you send them a detailed budget plan of how they should pay it? No. You simply release the debt to them, trusting they have the resources, and you await their instruction. You rest. You only believe. The words resonated, a faint but persistent chime in the cacophony of my worries. You only believe and rest. But how could I rest when the wolves were at the door? How could I simply believe when every fibre of my being, every business instinct I possessed, screamed for action, for intervention, for my help? For weeks, months even, I'd been trying to help God. I'd been working 18-hour days, calling every contact, reviewing every spreadsheet, cutting every corner. I had strategized, pleaded, negotiated. I had prayed, yes, but often my prayers felt more like detailed business proposals presented to the Almighty. Here's the plan, God, now please stamp it with your approval and provide the resources I need to execute my brilliant strategy. I was asking God to co-sign my efforts, rather than entrusting the whole mess to him. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. I wasn't believing. I was trying to do. My belief was conditional, dependent on my own strenuous efforts. I was like a drowning man thrashing, exhausting himself, when the lifeguard was already there, holding out a hand, asking only that I trust him. I opened my Bible again, my fingers tracing the letters of Mark 9:23. If you can believe, all things are possible to him who believes. The simplicity of it was staggering, almost insulting to my complex, problem-solving mind. No fine print, no caveats about provided you also hustle relentlessly. Just believe. A profound weariness settled over me then, but it was different this time. It wasn't the bone-aching exhaustion of endless striving. It was the blessed fatigue of surrender. I had nothing left to give, nothing left to do. Perhaps, just perhaps, that was exactly where God wanted me, at the end of myself where he could finally begin. The next morning felt strangely light, despite the darkness that still clung to the edges of my financial reality. I usually woke up with a knot in my stomach, already mentally listing the day's impossible tasks. Today, the knot was still there, a faint echo, but something else was present, a quiet resolve. I still didn't know how things would be resolved, but I decided, with a conscious act of will, that I would only believe. This wasn't easy. My phone rang that morning, and it was my lead accountant, David, his voice tight. "Dennis, the payroll is definitely short. We need a minimum of 50,000 by Friday or we're facing serious issues." My old self would have launched into a flurry of calls, desperate emails, frantically trying to dig up capital, but something held me back. I closed my eyes for a brief second, repeating the words, "Only believe. Rest." "David," I said, my voice steadier than I expected, "process what you can. I'll get the rest. Just trust me on this." Even as I said it, I felt a tremor of fear. Was this foolishness? Was I tempting fate? Or was it faith? I spent the morning not in frantic negotiation, but in prayer. Not the demanding, desperate prayers of previous weeks, but prayers of release. "God," I whispered, kneeling beside my desk chair, "I give it all to you. The business, the debts, the payroll, my family's future, my reputation. I surrender it. You promised to pay my debts. I believe you will. I will rest in that promise." It felt terrifying, like stepping off a cliff. But under the terror there was a strange, nascent peace. That afternoon I did something I hadn't done in months. I left the office at 4 p.m. Sarah was surprised. "Everything all right?" she asked, her brow furrowed. "Everything's going to be all right," I said, and for the first time in a long time, I actually believed it. We took the girls to the park, pushed them on the swings, and for a few hours I allowed myself to be present, to laugh, to enjoy the simple blessing of my family. The next day, Thursday, the dread of Friday's payroll loomed large. I still had no idea where the money would come from. My human logic screamed at me to act. I fought the urge to open the spreadsheet, to call the bank, to beg. Instead, I opened my Bible again, lingering on Psalm 37:7. "Be still before the Lord and wait patiently for him." Around 11 a.m., my phone rang. It was Mark Jensen, a colleague who had recently retired from a rival firm. I braced myself for another polite rejection, another door closing. "Dennis," Mark began, his voice surprisingly cheerful, "I hear you're going through a rough patch. Listen, I've been doing some consulting since I retired. I've got a client, a startup, that's just landed a massive investment. They're looking for a seasoned firm to handle their entire tech infrastructure." I immediately thought of Thorne Innovations. "Your reputation for quality is unmatched despite, well, you know." My breath caught in my throat. This wasn't just a client. This was potentially the client. A game changer. "Mark, that's incredible. But honestly, we're a bit strapped right now. Cash flow, you understand." "That's the beauty of it," Mark chuckled. "They're flush with capital. They need a firm that can hit the ground running, and they're willing to pay a substantial upfront retainer to secure a long-term partnership. They want to meet this afternoon, and they're ready to move fast." "Upfront retainer?" I repeated, my mind racing. "How substantial?" "Let's just say," Mark replied, "it would more than cover your immediate needs and then some. Consider it a down payment on a very healthy future." My eyes welled up. It was impossible. Not a week, not a month, but the same day I decided to truly surrender. The payroll was due tomorrow, and here was a solution dropped into my lap, entirely unsolicited, entirely unearned by my frantic striving. I met with the startup's founders that afternoon. They were energetic, visionary, and clearly impressed with Thorne Innovation's past work. They weren't interested in my current financial woes. They were interested in my reputation, my team, and our capability. By the end of the meeting, a preliminary agreement was signed, and a significant wire transfer was initiated, more than enough to cover payroll and a good chunk of my outstanding debts. The next morning, Friday, David called, his voice filled with amazement. "Dennis, the money just hit the account. A huge sum. What on earth did you do?" "I didn't do anything, David," I said, a profound sense of awe washing over me. "God did." In the weeks and months that followed, Thorne Innovations didn't instantaneously become a multi-billion-dollar corporation overnight. The journey was still challenging, but it was fundamentally different. The new client provided a stable foundation, allowing us to weather other storms and rebuild. Other unexpected opportunities began to surface, often through networks I hadn't actively pursued, appearing as if divinely guided. But the real transformation happened within me. The knot of anxiety that had been my constant companion loosened its grip. My prayers shifted from frantic pleas to grateful conversations. I still worked hard, still strategized, but my efforts were no longer driven by fear or the desperate belief that it all hinged on me. They were driven by purpose, by stewardship, by a calm assurance that God was indeed in control, orchestrating things far beyond my limited understanding. I often revisited Mark 9:23, but now its words were alive, vibrant. If you can believe, all things are possible to him who believes. I realized I had been trying to help God do what he promised, instead of simply believing him. I had been trying to pay down the debt myself, even though the ultimate creditor had declared he would provide. The lesson was etched into my soul. God does not need our help to do what he promises. He only needs us to believe. To truly believe, to step back from the frantic striving, and to rest in the unwavering certainty of his provision. It's not about being passive. It's about a deeper, more profound form of action, the action of faith. My business was on solid ground again, but more importantly, my faith had been rebuilt on an unshakable foundation. The drama of those desperate months had been a crucible, refining my understanding of what it truly means to only believe. And in that belief, truly, all things became possible. Please don't forget to like this video if it encouraged you. Also subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories and share with someone who needs to hear this message today. Please know that God is always ready to carry you and your challenges because he loves you and not because you are good. Why not let him bear your weights for you by committing them to him in prayers?